You think the purpose of education is reading, writing, and arithmetic? The purpose of education is to change the thoughts, actions, and feelings of students. Hitler wanted to control the education system in Germany. Stalin did in Russia, Mao Zedong in China. You have to get a hold of the minds of the young, where you break the person's values. You break their understanding of their individuality. You bring them to consensus with the group. They become a member of the collective. You cannot expect to have a smoothly running world socialist system if you have people out there who are going to object to what you're trying to do. So you have to brainwash.
Well, during the war with Napoleon against Prussia, or basically modern-day Germany, what happened was the Germans at that time trained their soldiers in the trivium and quadrivium. And then when Napoleon was coming in, invading the country, the soldiers, having been well educated and seen through the rhetoric, refused to fight and refused to stand and die for this invading army. And then Prussia lost the war, and what they did was they sought to dumb down their populace so that they could create better followers instead of better thinkers. And so they basically developed a system that was based on, rather than autodidactic, basically you're going to mimic or mimetic learning. You're going to basically just regurgitate everything we say. This was they basically, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, the Prussian education system was brought into the United States, I believe, sort of tested out there and then considered a success and then pushed across the rest of the country. And now, for that matter, the rest of the world, all of the world's countries, all of the world's peoples are, except for the elites, are brought up under this Prussian education system today. It's not about creating critical thinkers and independent-minded people that are self-sufficient, autonomous, autodidactic learners who can learn any subject on their own. It's about creating good soldiers, good factory workers. Who was it? Maybe it was Rockefeller or Carnegie or all of them, who just basically they wanted to create good slave worker employees that didn't resist and would do what they're told. And that's the sum of the U.S. or the world's education system, for that matter, today.
John D. Rockefeller, I think, voiced the beliefs of this ruling elite that wants to try to homogenize our education system when he was quoted as saying, "I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers." So I think the education system is not only pushing people into a socialized version of government, but also dumbing the individual down to the point to where he'll be a good worker in the factory, or he'll be a good worker in Silicon Valley. He may know a lot about computers, but he is not going to have a classic education that would allow him to take all of the facets of the culture and the society and put it together and really form an intelligent opinion as to what's really going on and what might be in the best interest of the individual.
You might want to ask yourself why the entire culture is utterly saturated with mass media entertainment from all sides, while the educational system in America continues its stupefying downward slide since the U.S. government decided to take over and subsidize the public school system.
What your government pays for, it gets. When we understand that, then we look at government-financed institutions of education and see the kind of students and the kind of education that's being turned out by these government-financed schools. Logic will tell you that if what is being turned out in those schools was not in accord with what the state and the federal government wanted, then it would change it. The bottom line is that the government is getting what they have ordered. They do not want your children to be educated. They do not want you to think too much, so that you don't get in the way of important people by doing too much thinking.
You sat around a table and you said, right, what we need to do is we need to find some way of getting young people to see the world the way we want them to see it, so that by the time they become adults, they are completely following the reality we want them to believe in. Someone might say, well, they might not have it right, but you know the ideal thing? What we do is we have a system where we take children away from their parents at least 5 days a week, all day, from about the age of 4 and 5, and we have control of their minds until they're about 17, 18. That would be ideal. But of course, that's what happens. It's called the education system, and it's indoctrination.
With a deliberate push for government-controlled educational curriculums, generation after generation of the youth are being taught to focus only on the facts, figures, and numbers. Repetition is used to train children subconsciously to accept what they're learning. Children aren't rewarded for questioning the validity of the information they receive. They are ridiculed. However, the children who blindly accept the information as true and merely regurgitate the information on command when it is time to take a test, those children go on to become the decision makers in our government, law, medicine, business, and every other occupation with power and prestige.
What we call education works like this. Information is pumped into the left brain, most of it completely rubbish. And what people are asked to do, students are asked to do, is to hold that information there. And then when they get an exam paper in front of them, to regurgitate that onto the paper. If they remember it and put it there well enough, and repeat what they've been told, they pass the exam and progress. If they take that information in the left brain, transfer it to the right and start filtering it and questioning it, and saying, well, does it make sense? What do I think about this? And then tell the exam paper, oh, actually, it's a piece of shit, this stuff. Then they don't pass the exam, and they don't progress. The education system is completely built to create left brain prisoners who are basically sponges of the official version of life.
Ogłoszone niedawno przez Bibliotekę Narodową dane dotyczące stanu czytelnictwa w Polsce są porażające. To gorzej niż źle. Jesteśmy w przeważającej większości społeczeństwem wtórnych analfabetów. Jeżeli bowiem około 62% Polaków nie przeczytało w ciągu roku ani jednej książki, a wśród osób z wyższym wykształceniem do nieprzeczytania tej jednej, jedynej książki przyznaje się około 25%, to znaczy, że cały system edukacji jest fatalny, a dokładniej mówiąc, celowo tak zaprogramowany, aby pogłębiać analfabetyzm. Bo to umiejętność płynnego czytania sprawia, że potrafimy przyswajać sobie wiedzę. W innym wypadku ta wiedza jest ciałem obcym, które umysł nasz błyskawicznie eliminuje. Czytelnictwo jest podstawą rozwoju inteligencji indywidualnej i społecznej. Prowadzona od kilku lat reforma edukacji, jak i reforma nauki mają tak naprawdę pogłębić zapaść intelektualną naszego narodu. I czynią to niestety skutecznie. Statystyki mówią tu same za siebie. Kto się chce obronić, musi czytać przynajmniej jedną książkę tygodniowo, aż odkryje radość i sens czytania. Dopiero wtedy społeczeństwo wreszcie się obudzi i odrodzi.
All over the world, we must have education. Yes, let's try it. Let's have some education instead of indoctrination of a belief system. What do I think of education? I think it would be a very good idea.
And I think anybody who has children, you come to this realization, you know, what'll it be? Alienated, cynical intellectual, or slack-jawed, half-wit consumer of the horseshit being handed down from on high? There is not much choice in there, you see, and we all want our children to be well-adjusted. It's unfortunately there's nothing to be well-adjusted to, so that's a real problem.